Hi, this is Abhijit. Let us look into some of the mistakes that we actually land up into and then start struggling to fix them, which takes hours and hours. Um, Quick example is when you look at your predecessors here, you would see that avoid, you will see that adding a predecessor to a group task will make it too difficult for you. Let's look at an example. Say, create tasks. I would say that after I finish my milestone 1, I would like to start my create task. And I say, putting a predecessor on a group task, put number 7. You see, it changes, it makes an impact on all the tasks later. It is very difficult to understand now what is the dependency on task number 3 versus task number 7 on this task, right? You said task number 10, start to start. You see, it has changed all of these details. Task number 11, it has changed all of the dates here based on what you see here. This is ambiguous. If you look into any of the templates provided by Microsoft, you would find the saying that none of these group level tasks should have a predecessor or a successor. Even the same thing applies for when you are actually working on a group task, assigning a resource to the group task, you assign project manager to the group task, is again proving to be trouble for you. The reason being, even I'm unsure how the project manager gets the task, because all of these tasks are allocated to a particular resource. Now, if you're assigning a task to a project manager, which is a group level task, the project manager gets a bunch of tasks here as well. Now, how does that impact? So right click here, look into the resource usage. And if you look into the project manager here, what would you see? Okay, so let's look into the Gantt chart. You put in a create task 2 for the project manager. When I'm going into the resource usage for the project manager, so I have project manager here, and you see the create task 2 is not coming up. Create task 1 comes up, analyze requirement comes up, but the task 2 doesn't come up because that's a group level task. And that's where you will land up in difficulty in understanding where I am actually spending more of the resource. And it's still there. You see, it says 16 hours in here, 12 hours in here, right? But on this date, I have only 4.8 hours. So where's the other gone? The same thing applies here as well. See? But this 12.8 hours doesn't come up appropriately for this particular project manager. So this is different. This row is different. Don't go by this row. So this is what your project manager is allocated, a couple of tasks, but you still have more. So it is quite dangerous to actually put a resource on a group task. Okay, I'm taking that off. Perfect. And another thing is, remember that as you carry on your work, you said right click, insert, and we're inserting a task here and say approve design. Just as an example, approve design. Okay, fine. You said it will take you 5 days. You know that you have an approver who works 50% of your time. Yep, it would take him 20 hours. It could be even less. And you say that instead of putting in a dependency, you say that, well, the approver is available sometime in March, and you say he's going to start on 11th of March. Done. Now you left the plan as is. You simply left the plan as is. What happens, you see here, is your approval ends on 17th of March. However, your milestone completion is 15th of March. In a hurry, if you're not actually looking into the dependencies appropriately, you would end up saying that I am going to complete phase 2 by 15th of March. Hold on. You have a task which completes on 17th of March. That will give you a difficulty. Now you would start struggling around. Look at phase 2. It says it's supposed to complete on 17th of March. However, your milestone says it completes on 15th of March, right? So instead of forcing in dependencies, instead of forcing in these details, what I would say is, okay, so it's giving you a pointer here. Keep the constraint, or you said remove the constraint. It's far better that you actually, let's look at this task once more. I double clicked on it. I'm looking into advanced and it says start no earlier than 11th. So it has actually added a constraint for you. There you go. You're forcing in some constraints, which will again give you trouble. Removing these constraints will again take you time. So when you actually add this task, okay, this is something will bring you trouble. The moment you just blindly keep adding in tasks. So some common mistakes that I would strongly suggest you kind of take care of. Make sure your dependencies look good. Make sure when you're adding in a task, don't just try blindly adding in your start and finish dates and then carry on from there. And another one is if you're working across the geo, so you may have resources from United States, you may have resources from United Kingdom, India, and other countries. Ensure that you put in a date format. You see, since I put in a date format appropriately, everybody understands it is 11th of March. Okay, sometimes what you see is if you just leave the option of the date format. See, I left it over here, standard one. It is very difficult for somebody to understand this date. Someone from United Kingdom would say it is 11th of March. However, somebody from United States would understand this is 3rd of November. Again, a trouble for you in order to make things happen across. That's the reason we put in some best practices over here, right? And another thing that you would see is that irrespective of you make this 4 hours, still works for you. Now, if I add in a task here, what I've done here is I have under options, I have under schedule, I have made all my tasks as fixed duration, right? Now, if I open another project here, or rather I say, I am adding in, say, if you've never done this and you made this task as fixed units as it was before, it would be effort driven for you. Okay, I remove the resource and I put the resource back. 20 hours. You see the trouble now? The moment you make it 3 hours, your duration changes. But you know that approver will take you 5 hours. Put the 5 hours back and the work changes. So since you made it fixed units, you know that approver is going to work 50% of your time always. It is always not the case. It is always not the case that your approver is going to work all that 5 days, this many hours. He would take some time, do his job, then he waits for something else, waits for his dependencies, waits for his things to be done, and then he comes back. And that you need to provide some lead time around that work. So it's not a meter up and a meter down. So ensure that, so this brings you trouble. I hope you understand these difficulties, and these difficulties will bring in more trouble for you when you try to adjust approvers percentage completion, percentage allocation and all. So what we try to middle with is actually see that, okay, you could double click on it and then you try to fix something around the resource units. Okay, it's 20% allocated, and then try to fix things around. So I've seen this, I've exercised this, but this brings in far more trouble than the other way. So that's the reason I kept it fixed duration. These are few common mistakes that you end up with. actually to fix things. And another thing is that if you know that well, even if I complete it on 8th, I would begin on 11th. Don't force it on 11th. Rather, we would try something else, because forcing it, keeping these predecessors out, you have lost the dependency on this task. What happens if this task is delayed or you do it earlier? Until you get this task done, you can't come down to the latter tasks. So these are the details that will actually say, now I have no way to understand what has happened. 29th March, I will start changing this, I will start changing this, I will start changing this, right? So a predecessor, just putting in a proper predecessor actually gives you an understanding immediately what happens in your project, rather than just lingering around and figuring out yourself. This is where you start spending time and then say that, well, I can't get around this project plan appropriately. So so ensure that take this action. So I've shown you live what difficulties you find. In the next session, I'll show you how to overcome this actually. Actually, you have learned the best practices by now to overcome them when you put in your proper way of setting up your project in the beginning. I think that will help you. So let's look into some best practices when you actually put in your project plan. I'm going to do the same thing, but in the best practice way in the next lecture. I hope you enjoyed this session.